On the podcast today, we have the next episode of the 196 meditations on the Yoga Sutras. And today we'll be dissecting Sutras 30 to 40. So without further ado.
Yeah. Sickness, apathy, doubt, carelessness, laziness, sexual indulgence, delusion, lack of progress, and inconsistency are all distractions that, by stirring up consciousness, act as barriers to stillness. When they do, one may experience distress, depression, or the inability to maintain steadiness of posture or breathing. One can subdue these distractions by working with any one of the following principles of practice. Consciousness settles as one radiates friendliness, compassion, delight, and equanimity toward all things, whether pleasant or painful, good or bad. Or by pausing after breath flows in or out, or by steadily observing as new sensations materialize, or when experiencing thoughts that are luminous and free of sorrow, or by focusing on things that do not inspire attachment, or by reflecting on insights culled from sleep and dreaming, or through meditative absorption in any desired object. One can become fully absorbed in any object, whether vast or infinitesimal.
Yes. So these 10 sutras, as you mentioned, dissect a few things, right? They dissect 9 distractions, 3 warning signs that we have to look out for, and also 7 ways to neutralize these distractions in our spiritual practice. So again, as we've mentioned in the earlier episodes of the Yoga Sutras, the Yoga Sutra is really a manual for serious meditation practitioners. So, and we get down into the basis of perception, mental activity, a lot of things that a lot of other traditions don't consider. So Patanjali goes down into these deeper levels. So as you mentioned, with the 9 distractions, we have sickness, apathy, doubt, carelessness, laziness, sexual indulgence, delusion, lack of progress, and inconstancy. So it's interesting here that even he mentioned sickness, right? So Patanjali goes all the way here. So trying to reorient our awareness that we should even be in practice when we are ill.
Yes.
Which is very difficult, right? Like I remember seeing footage of Swami Dayananda when he was dying, and he was still singing Om Namah Shivaya, so he was still really dedicated to the practice, pretty inspiring. But you could tell his psychosomatic organism is in pain, but he's holding on to something in death, right? And so this is what Patanjali is talking about. It's about always holding on to that stillness in the present moment, which is what yoga is all about.
Yes. These all 9 types of distraction all comes from the illusion of separate self. We are separated from the body, the world. I think this sort of idea, again, that is an illusion. And I think a sickness, especially when we are sick, because we feel a lot of pain, right? And we don't want to do anything. We just want to be lazy and actually try to distract our mind off of this pain, right? So I think that's why the spiritual practice becomes even more important when we feel sick. That kind of numbs our attachment to the feeling of the body, I think.
Yeah. See, as we've discussed in other episodes, if you are practicing yoga sincerely, you are developing that gap, right, between Purusha, the pure awareness, let's call it Atman, undifferentiated consciousness in Vedanta, and Prakriti, all of the energy and the material world that the jiva, that the solar system is caught in, right? So, and as you were mentioning with the separate self, like we constantly think that this body, mind that we are, is separate from everything else, but it's just a part of Prakriti.
Yes.
So, but we have high opinions of ourselves as an ego, and we think that we are separate from nature and the world and so forth and so on. But it's just an element of that one material, mental energetic Prakriti.
Yes.
And so if you are practicing yoga sincerely, then you are developing that gap where, as I mentioned with Swami Dayananda's story, is that he had developed that gap in his life. And you also hear about this in stories about Tibetan monks, right, where they will check the body weeks after they have technically died, but there's something still within the body that's keeping the body almost preserved in some sense. Like it's because they were always holding on to this pure awareness that, you know, science doesn't really acknowledge,
Yes.
but the Eastern traditions always say that we need to focus on this pure awareness.
So, like, for instance, if there's a Tibetan Lama who passed away, but he was sincere about his own practice and his spiritual path, so like more and rigorous practice it was, longer the physical body was somewhat kind of preserved.
Yeah.
Because of that spirit, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. There's actually a monk in Thailand, I think he passed away in the 70s, and the body is still in not too bad shape. You know, like
Interesting.
I think it's in the south of Thailand. A lot of people visit there. And so, you know, you see evidence of this around the world, not just in Thailand, in Tibet and northern India and so forth. But the point of this is that the 9 distractions, they agitate this body-mind matrix that we are,
That's right.
this element of Prakriti. And the point of yoga practice is to preserve stillness in the present moment.
Yes.
Because if we use the description in the first few sutras of the Yoga Sutra with Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which explains the practice of yoga, which means you've got to kind of settle the whirlpools of the mind, the vrittis, to see in your true pure nature, then this is what it really is, right? The practice of yoga is this. It's about preventing, in this sense, the 9 distractions from agitating the vrittis, which eclipses the reality of the present moment and actually disturbs your mind, so then you can't experience the stillness of the mind, you know.
Yeah.
And as we said, Patanjali takes it even a step further, mentioning sickness, sexual indulgence, you know, these sorts of things that can be a big hindrance, especially for a spiritual aspirant.
Yeah.
And even lack of progress, like when we see in the modern day, you know, when people feel like they have no purpose or they lack progress in their life, they get very deflated, right? But Patanjali is saying if you are sincere in your practice of yoga, then you won't have any sort of anxiety about not making any progress in the progress in air quotes in the social world, so to speak.
I think if you follow the path sincerely for a long period of time, there's a sense of the ananda, the blissfulness, so that unconditioned joy is always with you. With that state of mind, there would never be such thing as lack of progress, because you always have a certain level of joy in life, right? So you'll be always kind of motivated to do something, like learning, exercising, could be anything really.
Yeah, and you won't overanalyze it.
No.
You know, a lot of people on the spiritual path overanalyze everything. Like, if you mention Brahman or Vedanta, then you often get the non-dual police come out and say, you know, those who speak about Brahman don't know Brahman. It's like, because that's at a very teenage level of spirituality, where once you become a mature aspirant on the spiritual path, you can speak about these things without an anxiety about if there's a right or wrong. That's a very Western competitive idea where people fall into this game of spiritual one-upsmanship, which is really ridiculous. As adults, we can talk about philosophy and learn from each other, and especially if we're sincere on the path, we don't have to play games with the non-dual police. So, these 9 distractions, as you said, are based on the illusion of the separate self, and this illusion that self is separate also from Prakriti, but it's not. And
so, according to these 9 types of distraction, we will have these 3 warning signs after the distraction. These signs are to show you that it's this distraction. These distractions have taken hold in your mind, in your consciousness, so that the state where you have been disturbed by these distractions, which is distress, depression, inability to maintain steadiness of posture or breathing. I think these maybe can be applied for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, this really gets into the vrittis, right? Like, because when the vrittis take hold, when the whirlpool of the mind, the mental activity is so intense, what do you have? You have restlessness, you have uncertainty, doubt. You're not sure about your life, right? Yes. Because you've got too much crap going on in your mind. And especially in this day and age where people are fixed to their phones and they're just going from one post to the next or whatever they do, which is agitating their mind, creating even more vrittis, because you're not just looking at that post innocently, you're looking at it with your own perception, your own judgment, which is then, evoking certain likes and dislikes, anger, so forth and so on in your mind.
So it causes a lot of subconscious activity while you're not even aware of it. And I think that's where the real danger is. Because we constantly expose ourselves in the online world in that fashion. So that we kind of hold on to this sort of emotion, anger, aggression, and deep sorrow, suppression, frustration, and whatnot, all these things. But you yourself aren't aware of those emotions that's happening within you. So you kind of keeping that in a storage room, right?
Samskaras.
Yes, you constantly somewhat getting disturbed by, but you don't know why and how, really.
Yeah. Well, in yoga, as we've discussed, and also within Buddhism as well, there's a focus on emptying the samskaras, the subliminal imprints and mental impressions that we accumulate through life, which in psychology would be related to the subconscious. But as you were mentioning, what we are doing is we just keep filling that room up, and we're proud of that room. We start, putting pictures up in the basement and
make it look nice.
Make
sure you fill it up.
Yeah, fill it right up. There's no room left. Not even an ant can get into the samskaras. So, and then we're holding on to that, right? And so then, when something does evoke a certain anger, we're proud to be aggressive about it. This is the mass psychosis that's happening in the world today, especially due to technology. And so the vrittis contribute to this because it contributes to you get caught in the whirlpool. That's why Patanjali uses the concept of a whirlpool, right? Yes. Because your mind is kind of caught in this turbulence, and you can't see the reality without your likes, dislikes, what, and your own personal biases. You can't sit back and just see the world purely without that. And so what does that lead into? Distress, as you mentioned, one of the warning signs. Depression, one of the big ones in the modern world. And also an inability to maintain steadiness of posture and breathing. And so we know that, right? When we are distressed, what happens? Breathing becomes shallow. You start to become very vulnerable and weak. Because
the distress implies that you are somewhat in fear for some reason, right? So that shows in your posture and your breathing being very unsteady, and you become more anxious.
Yes. Well, there was a rugby league coach here in Australia who was having a pretty tough time with the media because he wasn't getting the results at a big football club here, one of the most famous football clubs in Australia, and he was getting a lot of attack by the media, as the media do, right? They're trolls. So they're attacking his character and, he's not doing this and that. And then, he kind of cowered away from, like, society a little bit, even though he's still a coach. And one of the most respected people in the NRL came out and kind of gave him a phone call and said, when's the last time you took your wife to lunch? When's the last time you took your kids to school? Don't let the burden of all of this drag you down. Hold your head up high. Sometimes things don't work. It's life, right? And so this is what it means to keep your posture, keep your breathing, not be overwhelmed by the external world. Because, in reality, Prakriti in some sense is Maya, is an illusion. And so a lot of things that we do on a personal level, we're either going to fail or succeed, you know what I mean? It doesn't, in some sense, matter either way from a spiritual context, because we do things in life often that we fail at or we succeed at. Sometimes we put more value on certain things, so it feels worse when we fail. But we often fail in a lot of things that we don't even put value on certain things. We don't really care about it.
Right. Yeah.
So these are things we constantly got to think about, particularly when we're talking about being overwhelmed by the vrittis.
Yes.
So keeping composure, keeping steadiness of breath, these are very important, and not falling into restlessness, which is what,
Yes.
which is what the vrittis are all about.
As you mentioned earlier about the gap between the mind activity and the pure consciousness, and I think that applies similar in a way that how you should perceive distractions as well. I think nowadays I feel that the distractions are too real. So if you're in a tough situation, that situation is too vivid and real to you, so that you kind of forget what's really important in life, the real value in life. So to prevent that, I think we need to create somewhat a gap between what's really important to what actually what is disturbing you, the distractions. That distractions are not real.
No.
It's not real. It looks so real, and when you're in it, you kind of you get blacked out, right? You forget about everything.
Yeah.
But we can't be in that state of mind.
Well, the consistent thread between yoga, Taoism, Buddhism, Vedanta, and so forth is keeping to the basics and simplicity, and not losing sight of those. And when we live in a complex society, we often lose sight of those. We don't take the wife for lunch. We don't take the kids to school.
Yes.
We miss out on all the things that actually make life worth living. Yeah. And we get caught up in our own head and these distractions that are actually only reside in our own head, really. We've created this complex world for ourselves where we get overwhelmed by the life we've created for ourselves.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, we got to develop that gap, because once you have that gap, that can all go away and subside, and you're still shanti.
Yes.
It doesn't matter.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. And so, in saying that, that's when we move on to the 7 ways to neutralize distractions, right?
Yes.
And these are really interesting ones, actually, Patanjali mentioned. The first one is radiating friendliness, compassion, delight, and equanimity to all things. In some sense, impartially.
Yes.
Impartially.
Yes.
And so these actually would be called in yoga the 4 heavenly abodes. So Brahma Viharas. So having, friendliness, compassion, delight, and equanimity, which is very uncommon in the modern day.
Yes, it's pretty.
Just go online and see if anyone's friendly. You'll get told instantly what you're doing wrong, how much you're a bad person, and so forth.
How much they can teach you,
and
exactly. How much they are more intelligent.
Exactly.
Whatnot. Yeah, so again, this is will to greet all phenomenon with kindliness is this is the basis of non-reaction.
Yeah.
It comes from non-reactive state of mind that you're practicing friendliness, compassion, delight, because you won't have any conditioned judgment upon things, right? And that is, again, kind of common with Buddhist tradition as well, that compassion and loving kindness, this is actually basic practice in Buddhism.
Vairagya, right? Like you said, non-reaction, overcoming worldliness, but that's where the real friendliness, the impartial
Well, yeah, that's it. You don't come from certain agenda anymore.
No.
There is no agent anymore.
No.
Right?
No.
You are purely showing your loving kindness to everyone without any judgment or conditioning.
Yeah.
Because they are mirror-like of you as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
And as you know, we could look at that and we say, oh, friendliness and compassion. Of course, we would have that from that impartial view. But even Patanjali says we also have delight and equanimity that comes from that. Equanimity probably wouldn't be a surprise to a lot of people because, like, once you stop engaging with your own agenda and superimposing on other people, you have a much more spacious consciousness and you're much more free from your own mind, which is actually the problem in the first place. It's not really what's happening in the world. It's your own mind that's the problem.
Yeah.
So equanimity, but then also delight. So see, when you practice the Brahma Viharas, the 4 heavenly abodes, you actually begin to extract the real juice and fruit of life.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned before, Ananda, you start to experience this real joy that not many people experience in the modern day.
Yes.
Unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And so then we come on to the second way to neutralize distraction, which is pausing breath in and out. I mean, this
Pranayama. It's
yeah.
a very basic practice in Hatha Yoga, the Zen Buddhism, even in Yoga Sutra as well.
Yeah, and even this one, Patanjali, he's even explaining the most simplest form of pranayama here. He's not explaining Kapalbhati pranayama, the real forceful, the breath of fire that a lot of people are accustomed probably do know. This is a real basic one that they actually even practice in Zen monasteries, when you breathe in and you just hold the breath for 5 seconds, and then you breathe out, and then as you've exhaled all the air out of your lungs, then you hold again for 5 seconds, and you just constantly do this. And if you do this, say for 30 minutes, you have nothing.
Yeah, the vrittis all subside.
Gone.
Yeah.
Actually, instantly when you start practicing this form of pranayama, you start to feel it instantly, because the breath has a gravitational pull on consciousness.
Right.
That's why all meditation practices, even within Tai Chi Chuan and Hatha Yoga, there's a breath component that's very important because it has a pull on consciousness. How do we stop the vrittis? Have you breathed today? And people say, what do you mean? Of course I have. But have you been conscious of your breath?
Yes.
Oh, no, I haven't. Well, there you go. So then once you begin to be conscious of your breath, then you have this pull on the consciousness, and it actually turns you away from distractions. And so you and I have practiced that for many years, and we know that just a simple form of breath, like this simple form of pranayama in Patanjali Yoga, I mean, if you practice it for 1 hour, you're completely gone.
It has real significant effect, and it's a very powerful method, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely, yes, there is a good gravitational pull to the pure consciousness, and also the breath is the only connection with our consciousness and the body as well. That's why using breath exercise is it's actually fundamental.
It is. We'll take this away. What happens? You don't breathe no more? What?
Yeah. No more then.
No more. So the third way to neutralize distraction is steadily observing as new sensations materialize. So what we're really talking about here is mindfulness of sensations as they are.
Yeah.
So the sensations here, mental sensations,
yes,
is physical world, whatever's happening in the physical world, everything really.
Yeah.
The sensations of the whole panorama of Prakriti.
Yes. Yeah, mindfulness practice, if you, again, can hold for a long period of time, it reveals a lot of things. It reveals, like, details of your emotions and also certain reactions that you've reacted from certain situations, including, like, very subtle aspects of your own perception on things as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because mindfulness meaning that you are observing your inner world, inner landscape very carefully, right? and you become more conscious of your own emotions, and you start it gives you opportunity to start working on them. Why was I triggered by this, and why did I feel such way? And even perception on the world, the way perception can easily lead into judgment as well, because the way we perceive things also must have certain agenda, right?
Yep.
We come from certain conditional mind.
Yep.
So these subtle aspects of perception also become a bit more on the surface, that you will be able to see what kind of prejudice or your conditioning that you've had for such long time.
Your biases and everything like
yes,
that. Your
yes.
own personal agendas. This is why I mentioned at the start, like this, especially like these type of sutras, these 10, we're getting down into a deeper level where we're analyzing the activity of mind and perception itself, right? Perception itself. So Patanjali talks about pravriti. So pravriti is like this flicker of mental activity that we have. And so when you have this flicker of mental activity, these sensations in your mind that come from the samskaras, it's about developing, well, if you are practicing yoga, you are trying to develop that gap. So you are starting to witness those just as they are and not reacting to them.
Yes.
Usually we have the flicker of attention, we have the pravriti, but then we act.
It's a simultaneous
reaction. We emotionally react.
No filter, no gap, nothing.
Yes, that's right. So these are what cause suffering, right? So the pravriti, the mental activity, are what causes suffering, because we act from that place, and then we cause all sorts of karma, and we cause harm on others and harm for ourselves as well. And so it's a very unconscious way to actually operate in the world when you think about it. And a lot of people experience this when they first come across spirituality. When they become more attentive to their mind, they realize how haphazardly they were going through life.
Yes.
Without any filter, without any sense of self-observation. It is pretty insane when you think about it, right?
Yes. I liked how actually the commentary, he said that this is chains of rumination.
Yes. Yes, that's
like
right.
never-ending chains of rumination, right? Like thoughts after thoughts, and that those thoughts trigger certain emotions, and emotion after emotion, you get reacted by your own emotion, and then you acted in different ways. You compromise in your way of thinking, behavior, and that creates another thought, and it's just never-ending cycle.
Never-ending cycle. And we've all experienced it, because we're all human and we all have a mad mind. And so Patanjali talks about, like, once you start to observe the pravriti, so the
activity of
mind, the flicker of activity of the mind, we calm the nervous system down with the incessant samskaras, the subliminal activity.
Yes.
And so the point of that is you begin to access the subtle aspects of your perception itself, just perceiving itself.
Right.
And so that's why I mentioned this is a meditation manual, the Yoga Sutras. So when you begin to really calm the pravriti down in your own mind, the vrittis, so to speak, then you start to access the aspects of perception itself, just pure seeing, which is very difficult for most people who haven't even entered the path. Because if you say to the average Joe or Jane, do you know about the aspects of your perception? They'd be like, what are you talking about?
Oh, it's like talking in an alien language.
Alien language, yeah, exactly. And so, that's why this language is for some and not for all, obviously. Though, this is what's very important, because when we begin to observe that activity, the sensations, when we, as he says, mindful of these sensations that materialize, that arise in our mind,
right,
then we start to, go to the deeper level, where we go to perception and awareness itself. And we start to then observe the pure seeing.
And when pure seeing gets prolonged, then there is no arising anymore.
No.
Obviously, that comes in long period of practice.
Exactly. In Vipassana, they say that this is a method to actually empty out the samskaras.
Yeah.
Because if you're on the level where you're just looking at pure seeing, not looking at pure seeing, but you are observing the aspects of your pure seeing. At the same time, someone's in the samskaras just throwing junk out of it. Like,
Right.
you've got someone in there going, oh, well, the game is up. Because I'm not, this being is not paying attention anymore to the vrittis and the samskaras and the vasanas and karma.
Yes. You don't give any fuel anymore. You don't feed it anymore.
The house starts to burn down.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's why it slowly kind of it disappears. It loses its power.
Loses its power.
Yeah, because it bubbles pop up, right? But you're just purely observing. You become a pure witness, right? You're just watching it. Do you react? Of course not. You don't react. You don't get triggered by those thoughts. You just remain as the pure consciousness, the pure witness, and let these bubbles pop and go, right?
Yep.
But once you do that, there's a kind of alchemy happens.
Exactly.
That's the moment when these bubbles lose its power, and it doesn't exist anymore.
No. We can't say why, it just happens like that. I get a lot of people asking me about these methods in yoga and Vedanta and Vipassana, particularly. Why does it have this sort of effect? And it's like, well, we can't really say, but what we can say from observation is that this is what happens. You're just absorbed in pure being, pure abiding in the perception and the awareness, and you do that for prolonged periods of time, then the removalists have come into your house, taken everything out, and you can go back into that house, but there's nothing left there.
Yeah.
And so, and we have evidence of this through millions of monks, Ramana Maharshi, Lao Tzu, Shankara, whoever, right, who have practiced the same method.
Yes.
So it's no surprise, right? No surprise at all.
Again, instead of trying to find out why, I think that is just the nature of mind.
Yeah.
I think that's just purely nature of mind, and these sort of exercises actually reveal that nature of mind.
Yes.
That's what it is, I think.
Definitely. So now we get on to the fourth, replace distracting thoughts. So.
Yes. Yeah, like experience thoughts that are luminous and free of sorrow, that, is going beyond the likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically pretty much what we've been talking about, but it's about changing the mentality altogether.
Yeah.
So instead, like a lot of people get into this real negative bind in life, and they become pessimistic and cynical. And look, I'm not saying that being pessimistic and cynical is completely bad. There's times that probably that's necessary. But if you're so fixated on that at all times, I don't think that that's a healthy or beneficial for anybody. So Patanjali here is saying that you need to kind of free yourself from these likes and dislikes that we have, because this allows us to let go of the illusion of the separate self.
Yes, that's right. Again, likes and dislikes only based on the mind activity, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Like we pleasurable experience or in pleasurable experience, and we create likes and dislikes. This sort of idea, like concept, really, and that is very momentary and comes and goes. There is no such reason to be attached to these feelings, likes or dislikes.
No.
More we stay with the likes and dislikes, that only reinforce the separation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, we need to avoid these feelings.
Exactly. And so we move on to the fifth one, focusing on things that do not inspire attachment. Now, this is a way of kind of detaching from things actually you are attached to.
Yes.
It's a pretty simplified practice, really. Yeah. Like we often focus on things we are attached to, no matter whether it's a person or a job we have, a country we are, or not that we are, but we think that we are, and so forth, right? So we constantly are focused on things that we are attached to. And Patanjali is here saying, why don't you reorient your awareness to things that are, in some sense, meaningless to you, but focus there. Like focus on nature, for example. Imagine that. Like you say to someone today, I want you to go outside, sit on that hill and just focus on the surrounding mountains. It'd be like, why? But the point is back to what we were talking about before, is that once you change your perception, it starts to have a deeper practice, kind of a deeper effect on other things that you have within your samskaras and your vasanas. So you begin to empty that out by focusing on things that don't rekindle that fire.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny when we focus on things that actually doesn't trigger your attachment, that has this effect that like your mind becomes calm and quiet just naturally, right? So that allows us to have this space to, bring these samskaras and do a bit of cleaning work. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So then we get into the sixth one. This is an interesting one. Reflecting on insights culled from sleep and dreaming. So you don't see much from Patanjali about sleep and dreaming. Like you'll see more of this type of practice within Tibetan Buddhism, Tibetan yoga, the Bon tradition. Tibet in general have a big focus on dreaming and sleep. Yes. But you also see it in the tantric traditions of Shaivism and so forth. But this one is reflecting on insights culled from sleep and dreaming. So reflecting on what you can learn basically from your sleep and dreaming is basically what we're talking about.
Yeah, like you said, in Tibetan traditions, they actually put a lot of hours into this kind of practice, right? But even if you don't follow the Tibetan tradition, I mean, sometimes we do get some sort of insights from sleep or dreaming, right? Like again, that the sleep and dreaming is a reflection of your subconscious mind. So, something arises from your unconscious mind to kind of giving you some sort of message.
Exactly. Well, in Tibetan Buddhism, they have a big focus on lucid dreaming.
Yes.
So as a practice, and there are methods to practice lucid dreaming and so forth and so on. Look, some scholars think it's unnecessary. Some teachers think it's completely unnecessary. But then if you're with Alan Wallace, for example, who was one of the great scholars of Tibetan Buddhism and the Bon tradition and Tibetan yoga, who was a disciple of actually a Dalai Lama, he has a big focus on, not a big focus, but he speaks a lot about lucid dreaming and the practice of lucid dreaming and how to do it and so forth and so on. It's not for everyone, right? It's not for everyone. But there are certain things that you can learn through that practice, as you were talking about, because we can start then to, in some sense, surf the subconscious in a conscious manner, which is very different to like how our waking relationship with our samskaras and our vasanas.
Right. You might be able to see a bit more clearly. Yeah.
It might be horrific, but you might be able to see it more clearly and actually interact and engage with it in the dream landscape. So, and I think that Patanjali is in some sense talking a little bit about this, he's not saying lucid dreaming per se, but he's kind of hinting at there's a deeper element, insight that we can gain from observing, as you said, the subconscious and kind of trying to take a deeper message out of it. Look, not all dreams, and we don't want to extrapolate that to say all dreams and everything like that has a meaning for you. They don't.
Yes.
You might watch some stupid Netflix show before you go to bed and
then you dream of it.
Yeah, like that has no meaning for you at all. It's just a kind of an impression you took into your samskaras that's kind of just regurgitated in a dream landscape.
Yes.
It's when we have those deeper dreams that they feel like they're more real and they mean something.
Yes.
That is what Patanjali is talking about.
Yes.
So The seventh one, the last way to neutralize distractions, is meditative absorption in any desired object. So jhana.
Jhana. Yes.
So jhana, for those who don't know, is the seventh limb of the 8 limbs of yoga.
Yeah.
So, and the inner yoga, so to speak, is dharana, concentration, jhana, meditative absorption, and samadhi, release, you could say, complete absorption in the higher self, so to speak.
So I think that dharana, the attention, fixing attention, and jhana, absorption, and samadhi, the complete integration, that is, I think, pretty much the process that we will go through when you go through these 7 ways to neutralize the distraction that we've been talking about so far.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes, the fixing attention, dharana could be from mindfulness practiced through pranayama and whatnot. And focusing on things not inspiring attachment and all these kind of principles.
Yes.
And absorption, jhana.
Well, see, the jhana, the meditative absorption, right, is like, people would describe it that you meditate on an object. Now, the object is, don't think of an object as in like a physical object. You have an object of attention we got to think about here.
Yes.
So it could be breath. Yeah. It could be an image you have in your mind, so forth and so on. The point of jhana is that the more you practice this, the more your perceptual faculties flow towards the object, that's when the object becomes indivisible from the subject. So you have this kind of, you have this absorption then in the object where the object itself disappears. And this is what opens the gate up to samadhi. So if you have a breath practice, for example, and you practice in it for, I don't know, many years or so forth and so on, or maybe it can be the first time, you'll start to experience that this kind of this unification with the object of the practice, where you disappear. Yes. And then that's the only way samadhi can arrive.
This sounds like what we were talking about, that alchemy I mentioned. That when you're in deep practice of mindfulness and pranayama, then you purely become a pure witness to your own mind, and your bubbles arise. You don't no longer give any attention to them, and they kind of melt away on their own. So that's when that happens, that's that jhana is happening, that complete absorption, that meditative absorption.
Yes, that's right. So when we get into the inner yoga of the 8 limbs, as we mentioned here, dharana, jhana, and samadhi, when this process is complete, then the complete restlessness and movement of consciousness of the mind, it all comes to a standstill. The game is over. Yes. The game is over. And all that is left is pure stillness, is nirodha. That's why chittavritti nirodha, right? Like, so there's only stillness then. So you can see into the nature of your mind, and then even if I throw a rock into your tranquil lake, it'll just be absorbed and won't make a ripple. In the lake to kind of give a representation of what the experience is like, if you can call it an experience, because it's actually our true nature. Yes. But the 8 limbs of yoga are a way to reorient our awareness back towards that pure stillness.
And that is that integration, complete integration, the samadhi.
Exactly.
That's the state of the consciousness. Yeah.
Pure still state of consciousness. Yeah. So it all happens after we go through that process, right? Concentration, meditative absorption, then integration or release or liberation, whatever you want to call it. We have many ways to language samadhi. But that's what it is, right? And so that really sums up those 10 sutras. Yeah. And it's a good reminder for everyone to think about the 9 distractions, the 3 warning signs, if you are experiencing any of those warning signs. And if you are, then thinking about these 7 ways to neutralize these distractions.
Yes. Really good. Nice 10 verses.
Compact,
Yeah.
concise,
Yep.
to the point.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we hope you enjoyed, and see you guys next time.